So today I'm joined on the couch by Katie. Katie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So I was really lucky because I feel like I was able to get to know you better on our mission trip to Africa, which we went on last August. And on that trip, you kind of shared about your journey with triathlons. And so I thought it'd be great to have you here because I was really inspired by like your process. So maybe we can just kind of talk a little bit about that first. So first of all, what is a triathlon?
Yeah, so a triathlon is a race where you swim, bike, and run in that order. And there's different distances that you can do. So some shorter, some longer. I signed up for the shortest one because it was my first one, and I was not sure if I could do anything longer. But yeah, it's just a race, and they have them all over the world, and you can sign up and participate.
And remind me again, because I know we do have like a marathon aficionado team at New Wave. Did you used to do marathons as well or not?
Yeah, half marathons.
Half marathons.
So I've never done a marathon, and I don't think I ever want to. But I've done a few half marathons, but realized that I really don't love running, at least not for that distance. So a half marathon is 13 miles, which I think by mile 6 or 7, I'm done. Yeah.
And so is that kind of what propelled you to discover other kind of races to be a part of? Like, what made you feel like one day to wake up and be like, I want to sign up for a triathlon?
Yeah, I think it was at one of the half marathon expos. So before races, they usually have expos where different companies can kind of advertise their products specifically geared towards running. And at that one expo, there was a booth about triathlons, and I think I got a flyer and was like, oh, that might be cool to do someday, but kind of just tucked it at the back of my mind. And then after I did that last half marathon, where I realized like I really don't love running and don't think I can continue doing half marathons, I kind of revisited that thought, and it's been on my bucket list. So figured it'd be kind of fun to explore that. And it was right after I had done the half marathon, so I felt like at least in the running portion, I was a little bit trained up for it, and I wouldn't have to start from scratch.
I guess my one of my questions is like whether you're a marathon runner or like trying to do a triathlon, like what is that inner thing that makes you feel like this is something that I want to accomplish? Like the greater picture versus like whatever the race is.
Yeah, for me personally, I really enjoy the race aspect, or like the race day, kind of coming together with all of these people that you don't necessarily know, but even doing it with friends and having that common goal of accomplishing something together. I really love the spirit of it, and I think everyone there is just so excited to cheer you on and cheer themselves on, and kind of coming together and doing that has always been really exciting for me. So that's what I love about half marathons, and not so much the running, right? But more of the aspect of coming together with friends, and then also strangers, and running together and doing that together. And that's definitely something you can have at triathlons too. So I think that's kind of what's motivating me. But also, I feel like it's good to exercise, but I also am not somebody that necessarily loves exercising. So finding an activity or something that uh, I'm more interested in definitely helps.
That's so interesting you say that because I mean, I didn't know you had this part of your life, but you used to be an ice skater. And so that's also like sports, right? And
Yeah.
so even though you don't like being like exercise and athletics, like you actually are really good at it, or chase those things.
Yeah, I think growing up, I skated for I think about 10 years. But it was always an activity that I found was like a fun hobby and not so much exercise. So I think combining the two really helped uh, me stay, I guess, in shape, right? Where I was exercising, but I was still doing something I loved. And I think that's something I'm trying to find now, right? What is
Mhm.
something that I can do to still stay active, but doesn't feel like a chore or an obligation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with the triathlon, you said it was swim, bike, run in that order.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so were those three components? I mean, obviously you did the running because you did marathons, but swimming and biking, was that something that you were comfortable with, or was that something that you kind of had to learn?
Yeah, the biking portion, I mean, I've had a bike for a few years, and Eric and I will go on bike rides every now and then. I think he's definitely more of a biker than I am. I don't necessarily enjoy hills, so those are always more difficult for me to do. But biking, I think it's something that I learned when I was young, and I think people say you never forget how to ride a
Hmm.
bike. So that part didn't seem difficult. I think the swimming portion was a little bit more rough. I in middle school, I casually swam on a recreational swim team. So since then, I haven't really swam. So getting back into swimming was difficult, and I think the first time I jumped back in a pool, I realized like, wow, my lungs really cannot hold that much air. So that was really tough for me. And then also the aspect of learning how to swim in open water required a lot more training because it's so much different than the pool.
Yeah. I remember one Sunday because for people that don't know, Eric, her husband's a worship lead. I remember he came in like this like almost like a parka or waterproof thing, and I was like, "Where'd you come from?" He's like, "Oh, I was just like in the city, like, we're like swimming in the ocean or something." I was like, "What?" And then I talked to you, and then I realized that you were like practicing, I think, for the triathlon. But what did you have to do like to get yourself ready to swim in the open waters? Because just like you said, swimming in a pool is very different than swimming in the ocean, as some of us know who swim in the ocean.
Yes, I took like a swim clinic. So for the triathlon, they offered swim clinics for those who weren't as familiar with swimming in the ocean, and that was great because it was at the actual place where we'd be swimming for the triathlon, so I could familiarize myself a little bit with the environment. But I just remember that first swim clinic was really difficult for me because I felt like I got in and I was like, this is great. I'm going to swim and I'm going to practice and it's going to be fine. And I remember getting in and it was a completely different ball game. Like it didn't even feel like I knew how to swim because the water was dark and murky. You couldn't see anything. The water's cold. So your body's trying to get used to the cold temperature and you're also trying to swim, but you can't see anything. And I just remember being so thrown off that I don't even think I swam that day. Like I was really just treading water trying to stay alive. So after that, I signed up for this. It was a swim club that does weekly swims in the Berkeley Marina, and I think that's probably the day that you saw Eric. But I signed up to do that because I felt like I wasn't confident enough to swim by myself in open water. So at least there, I was like, there's people on boats and kayaks kind of overseeing, and if I'm failing and I need some help, I can flag someone down. So I signed up to do that, but that was also really rough. The water was super choppy. It was very windy, so I think I swam maybe half of the distance or quarter of the distance that we were kind of aiming to swim that day. And I remember just kind of getting waterboarded by the water because it was so windy and the waves are so big. Like every time I came up for a breath, I was just met with water. And at one point, I just ended up treading water, and I remember thinking like, this is where I die and drown because I was just so overwhelmed by needing to swim to practice, but also not feeling like I could do it. But I kind of just took that moment to kind of recenter myself and think to myself like, no, it's okay. I know how to swim. I can do this. And then kind of just swam back and tried again. And it was that last time that I went to try practicing swimming in open waters before the triathlon where I actually successfully swam, which was great because I think the triathlon was like the week or 2 weeks later. So I
Wow.
really cut it close. Yeah.
So what other aspects do you think was hard for you in terms of like training for the triathlon?
I think the discipline part,
Hmm.
kind of coming up with a schedule and sticking to it. I
Yeah,
for
what does that take? Like what
Yeah.
does like training for all three, like what does that look like in somebody's week?
Yeah, we signed up for the triathlon. So I did this triathlon with a friend, and we signed up, I think, 2 months before the the race was happening. So we had a 8 week training plan. I think I just Googled it and found a training plan, and it was pretty much every day you're either swimming or biking or running or doing two of the three activities, and then I think you get one rest day a week. So basically, every day you're doing some sort of activity, gearing up towards it. And In I think week one and two, it kind of starts off slow, kind of getting ramping up, and then once you get closer to the race, you're doing pretty much the race distance and maybe a little bit more.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then take me through kind of like on that day, right? Like you like worked for 8 weeks training for this. Like what did you have to do to get yourself psyched up? Like to be like, oh my God, like we're doing this. Because in training, do you ever do a simulation where it's like you're doing all three like in a timed amount? Or how did you do that?
No, I think I could have if I wanted to, but
Yeah.
I definitely didn't want to. I did some brick workouts, which is where you do two or three
Hmm.
of the workouts, like one right after the other. And you definitely do the distance and more for each activity while you're training. But I didn't do all three of them together. I did maybe like two of them together in training. So I think it was a little bit difficult because you also have to think about transition.
Right.
Where half marathons, you just run the whole thing, right? You put on your shoes and that's it. But for triathlons, you have to have a transition where you take off your wetsuit and kind of get ready for the bike portion, and then from the bike to the run. So I did a few practice runs with like what am I going to do? How am I going to take off things and put things on? But I think actually doing it is when you experience it. Yeah.
And the time doesn't stop, right? Like first of all, like is there a certain amount of time you have to do everything within?
No,
Oh,
I think they have a cutoff time. So if you are too slow, they eventually need to open up the roads again.
right.
So they kind of just, I think you're allowed to finish if you want to, but you're kind of like forced to
Shuttled.
do, yeah, like you're on the sidewalk or
Yeah.
something like that. But there's really no time limit. Like I think a lot of people set personal goals to break a time, but I had no reference because it was my first time doing it. So my goal was really just to finish. But the for the race, they kind of do the whole time. So it's like from the time you start the swim until you're done with the run is the entire length of the race and the time that you get. But they do splits, so you can kind of see how long you spent with each activity, and then also how long you did in transition. So I definitely spent a lot more time than I think most people do in transition, because I had a difficult time taking off my wetsuit because it's like wet and it's stuck to you, and you're kind of tired too. So uh, that's probably something I could improve on for future races.
That's what I was gonna ask you. I was like,
Yeah.
is your transition part of your overall race time? But that's cool that like they split it up.
Yeah.
And who's keeping track of all this time? Is there some like sort of app or you have to report into somebody?
Yeah, they give you a timing chip. So
Okay.
it's for the triathlon, it was like on a band that you put around your ankle. And then they have timing mats, so you just have to cross over it
Oh, that's
at
so
every point.
cool.
Yeah, and it'll kind of take your split, and then they have like an official time that they release at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
So cool. I'm like learning new language, like what a split is.
Yeah.
But what was your like what time did you start that morning and what was like your mental routine to kind of get yourself psyched up about it?
I'm trying to remember what time we started. So it was in Santa Cruz.
Okay.
So we drove down the morning of. I think we left probably at like 4:30 or 5 in the morning. And then you go and you kind of set up your bike in the transition area. So you kind of get your race number, you make sure you pin your bib to yourself. And then they have like race number stickers for your bike and your helmet, and all of that. So you kind of like set up, and everyone has their own little kind of little station inside the transition area with their bike and other gear. So you set that up, you put on your wetsuit, and then you walk over to the beach where the swim portion starts. And then they do a little like pre-race briefing, just kind of making sure everyone knows like this is the course you're gonna swim, this is where you get out, and make sure you follow the course and get back to transition okay. So I think the day of, there's a lot of adrenaline usually for me on race days. I'm usually just very like energetic and eager to kind of get started. Definitely a little nervous with this race, with the swimming part, because before the race I hadn't swam in open water for the distance that I needed to. Right, I've only done it in the pool, and even though I had that successful kind of trial run, it wasn't the entire thing. So definitely still a little bit nervous. And also with triathlons, when you swim, you're swimming with other people. So
Hmm.
there's always a risk of getting kicked in the face or kicking other people or things like that. So there's definitely needing to like calm myself and make sure, I know what I'm doing. I've practiced and kind of getting that set up. Yeah.
How many people do you think were in the triathlon with you?
Ooh,
Is it like
that's a good
hundreds or
question.
thousands or?
I think the race that I specifically signed up for wasn't a huge one, so I think probably hundreds. There were also people signed up to do a longer distance. So I did what's called a sprint, which is the shortest distance. It's kind of just a little bit of everything.
And what is that
Um,
distance like per item?
yeah, so for the swim, it was a half mile, which is about 30 laps in a pool.
Hmm.
The bike was, I think it was 13, 14 miles. And then the run was a 5K, so 3 miles.
Wow,
So
that's a lot of miles in a day.
it's just a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And then there are people doing an Olympic distance, which is double. Everything is double.
Mm.
Yeah. And then I don't think they had it at that specific race, but they have. I don't know if you've heard of the half Ironman or the
Yeah.
Ironman. So the Ironman is like the longest distance where you literally run a full marathon at the end, which I don't think I could ever do. But that one is really intense, and I know a lot of people that do triathlons that's kind of their goal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is like the entry into that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the sprint is kind of like this is great for beginners, or
Yeah.
if you're kind of just want to get your feet wet.
Still super advanced to me. What were your out of the three, like what was like your favorite one? Let's say like what was your favorite one leading up to it, and then what was one that like impressed you, like as you were going through or as you like recall?
I think my favorite one to train for was swimming
Hmm.
because when I swim in the pool, I don't really feel like I'm necessarily exerting myself. Whereas when you're biking or running, it's just like I feel tired.
Yeah.
So I think probably swimming is fun to train for, but it also gets to the point where it gets a little bit boring because you can't listen to music or
Mm,
really do anything. You're just kind of stuck swimming
yeah.
back and forth. Um, and I think that probably surprised me the most during the race too, because I went into it thinking it was going to be the most miserable part because I needed to kind of adjust to swimming in the ocean and there's all these other things I need to think about and can I even make it? But it was actually a really enjoyable swim and all of the things that I was afraid of happening didn't happen. So I really enjoyed that. But I would say that race, I enjoyed all three aspects because it was so beautiful.
Hmm.
Like you're in Santa Cruz, you're by the water. It's such a beautiful view and there are no hills. So that's always a plus.
What was one of the things that you felt like really proud of yourself for, like coming out of that? Because I know, like when I tackle big things, it's never it's hard for people to talk about what they're proud about, but like the things that you struggle with as you're going through like a project or something like that. And so maybe share one of the things that you came out of it feeling like, man, I conquered that, or I'm really proud that I was able to do that.
I think for me, it would be getting over my fear of like thinking I was going to drown in the
Hmm.
ocean because I don't think I realized I had that fear until I started training for the triathlon and needing to swim in the ocean. Uh, and I think getting over that was there were definitely points leading up to a triathlon where I was thinking, I don't think I can do this anymore. Like, should I cancel? Should I drop out? Or like, is there a way where I can skip over the swimming
Yeah.
part? So I think that getting over that fear was definitely really really great to feel afterwards, and um, even just like checking it off the bucket list and thinking like, wow, I can do it, right? And realizing how capable the human body is. I think seeing all of that was really great.
And that kind of leads me to one of the questions that I've always wanted to ask you is like, how do you have that mentality and that heart to keep going, even at moments that you feel like you want to give up? Because I think a lot of people, we go through things and we know there's challenges, but when things get hard, maybe you pass the first hurdle, the second, but like when things get really hard, like I think most people just kind of quit, right? But how do you, as like a competitor, like within yourself, like be able to overcome all of those things?
I think for me, it's kind of funny, but I feel like the financial investment is a big step for me. Like
Well, you
once,
are a financial analyst, right?
yeah, like once I commit to, I guess once I pay to
Yeah.
enter the race, I feel like I'm committing to doing it, and I'm going to see it through, or at least try to the best of my ability. But I think also even while training, like there were days where I didn't feel like training, right? And so I think realizing that there are times where it's okay to let my body rest and maybe skip a day, but then also realizing like I can't do this every day or I won't be prepared. So I think just figuring out how to balance that really helps for me. And I've realized that once I build a habit, I'm pretty good at it. So I think once I had the habit of, I'm going to do some sort of physical activity every day, it was easier for me to keep up with it and stay consistent.
Yeah. And then do you think that's like that method is something that carries over to like your everyday life, like not just in like when you're in competition?
Yeah, I think so. I've realized that I'm a very complacent person. I like being comfortable, and
Hmm.
so a lot of times I do, like I shared earlier, I do like being a homebody and just like relaxing and chilling. But I think if I decide that I want to do something, once I build that consistency, it helps a lot. And having someone to keep me accountable helps too. So I mentioned for the triathlon, I was training with a friend. So we would check in on each other and did you bike today or how did it go? I think that helps build that habit too.
And you mentioned that, we talked about your ice skating before, and then we talked about like the marathon and the triathlon. And a lot of that is almost like competition within yourself. Like, I don't think that these sports, like, at least from how you've explained it so far, is in competition with others. So, where did this come from? Like, was this part of like your childhood in terms of like the activities you participated, or, something that was like within your family? Like, tell me about the origin of that.
It's funny that you asked that because I don't think I'm a competitive person. And I think Eric would agree. Like whenever we play like board games or
Yeah.
anything, he's like, Katie is the least competitive person I know. Yeah, I don't really know. I feel like I just enjoy
Because you're in
doing
all these
things.
competitive sports.
It just so happens
It
that
just so
way.
happens, yeah.
Yeah, I think I just enjoy doing things, and I like they just happen to be competitive. But I think I also am not the type of person that is like, okay, I'm competing against myself or other people, and I need to win or I need to beat them. It's more of just if just wanting to do it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
For the experience and to say
Yeah.
that you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Check it off my list.
Yes. So do you have like a huge list? Because you've mentioned the list a couple times of like things that you want to do. Like, what's next on
Oh
your
man.
list?
Well, if it's triathlon related, I am actually thinking of doing
Are
another
you? I was gonna
one.
ask you
Yeah.
because yeah.
And I want to do the one that is like the next step up, which is like the distances are double of everything that I did
Jeez.
previously.
And I'm sure like that one for biking, there's gonna be hills involved,
Oh,
maybe.
maybe depends on the route. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a good course that isn't super hilly or high altitude. But yeah, I would like to do that. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah. Does your friend that you trained with share the same enthusiasm? Like, if you're like, we're gonna do another triathlon, are they gonna say yes?
I've been kind of sending her messages
Yeah.
that I want to do one, and she seems open to it. So we'll
Okay,
see.
good. Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad you found a good friend and partner
Yeah.
to be able to share this with.
And this time I'm trying to drag Eric to do it with
Oh,
me.
yeah.
He's open as long as it's not open water because he's scared of sharks.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Do they do triathlons without open waters?
There are some in lakes. Yeah. So
Oh,
there was
okay.
one that we were looking at in Lake Tahoe, which
That'd be
would be beautiful,
fun.
but Lake Tahoe is so high in elevation that I think the altitude would be really difficult to train for. So
Hmm.
we'll see.
Well, I feel like you guys should take a vacation out there and just do a mini simulation just to see.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. But what else is on your list like that's not triathlon related?
Ooh, that's a good question. I feel like I would like to pursue more hobbies
Hmm.
and things that I'm interested in. I don't know what they are, but I think it's kind of identifying that and pursuing that. There's a lot of like travel on there.
Hmm.
Really love traveling, so a few different places that Eric and I would love to go to. I think Italy's at the top of our list.
Yes. My favorite
So
place.
yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I've also thought it'd be cool to go backpacking.
Hmm.
But I don't know if I can hike carrying like
Your
backpacks
own
with
body weight and
yeah,
everything. Yeah.
exactly, carrying all of those things. So we'll see.
It's so great because I feel like, I know you obviously prior to this conversation, but I feel like what I've really grasped at like from our chat is that you're somebody that's like just constantly curious. And I think that's really amazing because it's like you're curious about something, but you actually have the follow through to go experiment and try it, to check that list off. So I think that's great.
I try to.
Yeah, no, I think it's good because a lot of times most people kind of just know the parameters of which they're interested in, but I feel like you're somebody that actually is curious about many things beyond. Like, and speaking of hobbies, like people don't know this about you, but you also do woodworking, which is really cool.
Yes, it was my COVID hobby.
Yeah.
So during COVID, my car lease ended and I was like, I have nowhere to go. So I had an empty spot in the garage. And I think before that, I always thought it'd be fun to kind of build something. And because I had that empty garage spot, I was like, this could be my workshop. And it kind of just happened and became my workshop. And I've, yeah, it's been a fun hobby, a big learning curve for sure, but I've been building a few different furniture and other items.
It's so cool because woodworking is not something normally associated with women, and you're like this woman woodworker. What kind of spearheaded like your notions of wanting to work with wood and to
Hmm.
make things like with,
Yeah, I think in my day job, because I spent a lot of time on the computer, just staring at a screen, a lot of times my hobbies tend to be more hands-on because I've realized I really enjoy doing that. So I don't know when it started and when I thought about making things with wood, but I've always thought that it would be fun to build something and kind of looking at furniture and just really admiring different things that people have made. So yeah, I think about it now because I'm trying to remember because in middle school when you had different electives you can take, I know woodworking was one that
yeah.
my middle school had, but I didn't take it. So I don't think I cared that much in middle school, like as a teenager even. But definitely like growing up and spending more and more time inside and in front of a computer, I've thought that would be fun to kind of build things and make things. And now I follow a lot of kind of like DIY
Yeah.
people who kind of renovate houses and things like that. And I think it'd be really cool one day to flip a house. So maybe that's another bucket list
Oh,
item.
okay. I see the path now. I love it.
Yeah.
Aspirations of little things working towards that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm like, I feel like I could totally see you on HGTV. As you know, they always have like a woodworking consultant or
Yeah.
carpenter. Like it could be you.
I don't know if I'm at that level, but that would be cool.
And then how did you learn how to do these things? Were you self-taught? Did you go to classes? Because I know they have like things like that available now.
Yeah, a lot of YouTube,
Okay.
and then trial and error. Yeah.
What was the first thing that you made? And did you have to spend a lot to get like all your equipment together? I imagine that's like a whole workshop or a whole garage full of stuff.
Yeah, by this point, I've collected a lot of
What?
different tools and equipment. But when I started, I wanted to make sure it was a hobby that I'd be interested in long term and not just kind of a phase. So I didn't want to get too many things. I think I limited myself to like one saw for my first project, and I built a breakfast nook bench for
You
our
made that
dining
out of a
area.
saw?
Well, like you have to
That's
buy the wood and stuff,
crazy.
but yeah,
Yeah.
I had one saw and then
Okay.
just like the power drills
Hmm.
and drivers. But it was definitely the more difficult path because like at this point now I'm like, wow, that would have been so much easier if I
Yeah.
had just bought this one equipment or this one tool, you know. But it was
You're like
a good
hand
learning.
sawing.
Exactly. Well, it was a power
Oh,
saw,
power
but
saw. Okay.
it's like a handheld one.
Yeah.
Um, and there were definitely moments where I was like, what am I doing? Like I have no idea what I'm doing. But the bench works and it hasn't fallen apart, and people sit on it. So
Amazing.
yeah.
What have you made to date? Like how, so this was a pandemic project, so it's like a 3-year thing maybe.
Yeah.
What have you made to date and what's been your favorite thing that you've made or the most proud?
Yeah, so the breakfast nook bench, and then I made a table to go with it. And then I did a similar bench for my sister-in-law. And then I feel like from there it's just been small projects here and there, little gifts for people. Most proud. I think probably the breakfast nook bench for my sister-in-law. She has like a wall with a weird angle, so it wasn't 90 degrees, and it was definitely difficult to figure out angles and geometry, and I was like, I should have paid more attention in math class. So I think that because that was so difficult, and because I was making it for someone else, I wanted to make sure it was something that, would hold up over time and something that would look nice and that she would be happy with. So I spent a lot of time on that project, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and I made cushions for it. So
You made cushions too? That's like sewing.
yeah.
I feel like you're going to have to invite me to your house one day. I'm going to invite myself over. I want to see all the things that you've made for it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't made anything lately. I haven't felt inspired, but
Yeah.
my current ongoing project that I haven't touched in a while is making Eric a pedal board
Okay.
for his guitar pedals. So maybe someday, if I ever get around to finishing it, you'll see it on stage someday.
Okay, that would be cool.
Yeah.
I feel like we have to make an announcement like this was
Oh,
made by
no.
Katie. Okay. And then what else are you kind of working on in terms of woodworking?
Not much. I would like to build a deck for our backyard.
Yeah. That's like ambitious.
Yeah.
It's good.
That's what Eric and I have been chatting about. He's like,
Yeah.
are you ever going to do it? I'm like, I want to. So we'll see. It's
Yeah.
getting warmer. Maybe that's next on the list.
Yeah. Okay. And then I feel like, yeah, again, I'm going to have to come over. Like once you finish it and the state is on,
Yeah.
like you're going to have to call me.
Sure.
So I can come and see
we'll
it.
have an outdoor dining party or something.
I heard you have a secret Instagram for
Oh,
your
no.
work. Are you comfortable sharing it? You don't have to.
Yeah. I mean, I don't post much.
Yeah.
But if you want to follow, it's Katie Saws.
Katie Saws. Okay, that's cute. So, you are a triathlon racer. You do woodworking. I'm like, what is next for Katie?
I'm also wondering that. I'm currently taking ceramics classes, which
Okay.
is fun, but that's more of just like a fun little hobby on the
Yeah,
side.
you're like you are like an inner artist. So I'm a arts and crafts person. So when my friends wanted to take a ceramics class, I was like, absolutely, I'm gonna kill this. It is so hard.
It is.
And at the end of class when they're like, oh, we can bake this, or if you feel like you really hate it, like
Yeah.
we'll just throw it back, right? And everybody, I feel like just to see that they did it was like, I'm gonna put mine in the fire to
Yeah.
be baked. And I was like, no, just throw mine in the trash. I was like, this is so hard.
It is really
Yeah.
difficult. Yeah. And the instructor just like, it's very casual.
They make it look so
Yeah.
easy sitting on their little chair, and
Yeah.
I'm like, this is really hard. Yeah.
All right, we have to go take a class sometime.
No, I think I'll just wait until you like become really good
Oh,
at it.
no.
I'll commission something. I feel like I already wrote that off the list for me. But thank you so much for taking time to chat with us today. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.